I've always loved the thrill of the open road, the way each turn could unravel a new mystery or adventure. That's why, when my friend Alex suggested we take a road trip to visit some off-the-beaten-path landmarks, I didn't hesitate. Our plan was simple. Drive from town to town, no real destination in mind, just two friends chasing the horizon. The excitement was palpable as we set off, but neither of us could have anticipated the nightmare that awaited us. Our journey began under the auspices of an azure sky, the sun, a benevolent guardian illuminating our path. We shared stories, laughed, and sang along to classic road trip anthems. Each town we passed through had its own charm, with locals greeting us with smiles and waves. It was the epitome of freedom, or so we thought, until we reached a small, seemingly forgotten gas station just as twilight began to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The attendant, an elderly man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of untold stories, filled our tank. His hands were steady, but there was a tremor in his voice as he spoke. "Be careful on the road ahead. It's not like the others." Curious, I asked, "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Just stay on the main roads." We thanked him, bemused by his cryptic warning, and drove off. The further we went, the more the landscape changed. Dense forests replaced open fields, and the once clear sky was now shrouded in a thick fog that seemed to swallow the road whole. It was in this eerie setting that we saw the sign, "Scenic Route, Next Right." Driven by an insatiable curiosity and the allure of the unknown, we veered off the main road. Almost immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The fog thickened, muffling the world around us, and the dense canopy of trees blotted out the fading light. It felt as though we had crossed into another realm, a place untouched by time. For miles, we saw nothing but the winding road ahead, until we stumbled upon a small, dilapidated town. It was as if the place had been frozen in time, buildings crumbling and streets overgrown with vegetation. No lights, no signs of life, just an oppressive silence that weighed heavily upon us. Intrigued and unnerved in equal measure, we decided to explore. The car seemed to protest as we parked, the engine sputtering to a halt. We stepped out into the cool air, the silence so profound it was almost deafening. Our footsteps echoed through the empty streets as we moved, drawn by an inexplicable force to the heart of the town. That's when we heard it, a child's laughter, fleeting and ethereal, as if carried by the wind. We followed the sound to an old playground where the rusted swings moved gently as though recently vacated. The laughter continued, a haunting melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Fear gripped us, a visceral, primal terror that urged us to flee. We rushed back to the car, only to find it enveloped in a thick mist, its contours barely visible. The laughter followed us, growing louder, more insistent. In a panic, we jumped into the car and attempted to start it, but it refused to come to life. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a suffocating silence. Then, without warning, shadows began to materialize in the fog. Shapes of people, or what used to be people, their features blurred and twisted into grotesque parodies of human faces. They moved towards us, slow and deliberate, as if savoring our fear. In a desperate attempt, I tried the ignition one last time, and to our disbelief, the engine roared to life. We sped away, the car's headlights barely piercing the fog as we navigated the treacherous road. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw the shadows recede, swallowed by the mist as the laughter resumed, a chilling reminder of our narrow escape. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, the fog dissipating as if it were a bad dream. But the fear lingered, a constant companion as we drove in silence, too shaken to speak. The rest of the trip passed in a blur, each mile taking us further from that forgotten town and its spectral inhabitants. It's been years since that road trip, but the memories haunt me still. I've tried to rationalize our experience, to convince myself it was just a product of our imagination, amplified by the fog and the isolation. But deep down, I know we stumbled upon something inexplicable, a sliver of darkness hidden away from the world. I no longer seek adventure on the open road. Instead, I heed the gas station attendant's warning, staying on the main roads, away from the paths less traveled. But sometimes, when the night is still and the fog rolls in, I hear it, the faint echo of laughter, a chilling reminder of the horror that lies just beyond the veil of reality.
The road had always been a place of solace for me, a stretch of asphalt where I could outrun my troubles if only for a while. That's what I thought anyway, until the night I took the long drive home from a friend's wedding in a remote part of the state. It was supposed to be a straightforward journey back to the city, a few hours of solitude and the soothing hum of the engine beneath the stars. But the road had other plans for me, plans that would turn my sanctuary into a corridor of dread. The wedding had ended late, and by the time I bid my farewells and set out, the moon was a thin crescent in the sky, barely casting light over the dark, winding roads. I was alone, the only traveler in a sea of trees that flanked the highway. The deeper I drove into the night, the more I felt a creeping unease, a sense that I was not alone after all. Miles from anywhere, my car's headlights caught something on the side of the road. A figure standing just beyond the reach of the light. I slowed down, squinting to see better, but as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, the result of too many hours on the road. But then the whispers started, soft and indistinct, as if carried by the wind through the cracks of my car. I turned the radio up, trying to drown them out, but they persisted, growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere, a cacophony of voices that I couldn't understand. Panic set in, my heart racing as I pushed the car faster, desperate to escape the unseen tormentors. That's when the car began to falter, the engine stuttering as if struggling against an unseen force. I was miles from anywhere, the whispers growing louder, more menacing. I felt a cold dread settle over me, the realization that I might not make it out of this nightmare. In a last-ditch effort, I pulled over, thinking maybe I could fix whatever was wrong. The moment the car stopped, the whispers ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. I got out, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as I checked the engine, but everything seemed fine. That's when I heard it, a soft, mournful wail that seemed to come from the woods. Drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity, I ventured a few steps into the trees, the beam of my flashlight dancing between the trunks. The wailing grew louder, more desperate, guiding me deeper into the forest until I stumbled upon a clearing. There, in the center, was a car, old and rusted, half swallowed by the earth, and inside, I could just make out the silhouette of a person. The wailing stopped as I approached, replaced by a heavy silence. I called out, asking if they needed help, but there was no response. As I drew closer, the figure vanished, leaving the car empty, a relic of some long-forgotten tragedy. I backed away, the realization dawning on me that I had stumbled into something otherworldly, a moment frozen in time. The whispers returned, louder now, a chorus of voices that seemed to mourn the lost soul I had just witnessed. I ran back to my car, the whispers chasing me, and drove away as fast as I could. The rest of the journey was a blur of fear and adrenaline, the road never seeming so long and lonely. When I finally reached the city, the first light of dawn was breaking. The whispers had ceased, and the oppressive feeling of being watched had lifted. I was safe, but the experience had changed me. The road was no longer a place of escape. It had shown me its hidden depths, its ability to echo the tragedies that unfold in its shadows.
I never believed in curses or haunted roads, that is, until my encounter on Route 29. The legend of the Phantom Hitchhiker was well known in my hometown, a tale passed down through generations, often dismissed as an urban myth designed to scare curious teenagers. I was among the skeptics, confident in my disbelief, until the night I found myself driving down that infamous stretch of road, My reality forever altered. It was a routine drive home from college for the holidays, a path I'd taken countless times without incident. The night was clear, stars punctuating the sky with their ancient light, the moon a silent witness to my journey. Route 29 was the fastest way home, a lonely road that carved through dense forests and forgotten fields. I remember feeling a sense of peace as I drove, the monotony of the road lulling me into a meditative state. That's when I saw her, a figure on the side of the road, thumb outstretched, the classic pose of a hitchhiker. It was odd seeing someone out here, especially so late at night. Concern overrode caution, and I slowed down, pulling over to offer assistance. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, dressed in a manner that seemed out of place, more suited to a bygone era than a modern roadside. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, a small smile playing on her lips as she thanked me. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, and when I asked where she was headed, she simply pointed forward. Something about her was unsettling, an aura of sorrow that clung to her like a shroud. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional whisper of tires on asphalt. I stole glances at her, trying to make conversation, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. It was then I noticed the temperature in the car had dropped, a chill seeping into the bones of the vehicle, wrapping around us like a cold embrace. Feeling uneasy, I decided to break the silence. "Is everything okay? You seem far from home." She turned to me, her eyes hollow, a depth to them that seemed to pull at my soul. "I am home," she whispered, her voice a melody of sadness and longing. Before I could respond, she pointed to a spot ahead, a dilapidated farmhouse barely visible through the trees. "This is where you can leave me," she said, her voice fading into the night air. I pulled over, confused but wanting to respect her wishes. Yet, as I turned to bid her goodbye, the passenger seat was empty. She was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echo of her presence and the chill that had enveloped the car. Panic surged through me as I searched the surrounding area, calling out into the darkness. But there was no sign of her. She had disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared. Shaken, I drove off, the encounter weighing heavily on my mind. When I reached home, I recounted the story to my parents, expecting disbelief or concern. Instead, I saw recognition in their eyes, a dawning realization that chilled me to the core. "You've seen her," my mother whispered, a hand to her mouth. "The girl from Route 29. They told me then of the local legend, a tale of a young woman who had died on that road decades ago. Her spirit doomed to wander, seeking passage to a home she could never return to. Many had seen her over the years, always at night, always disappearing before reaching her destination. I had been a skeptic, a disbeliever in tales of the supernatural. But that night on Route 29 changed me. I had encountered the phantom hitchhiker, a soul trapped in an endless loop of longing and loss. The experience haunted me, a constant reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond the veil of our understanding. Now, when I drive at night, especially along lonely stretches of road, I can't help but glance at the passenger seat, half expecting to see her sitting there, pointing the way home. And though I've never seen her again, I sometimes feel a chill, a sudden drop in temperature that reminds me of her presence, of the night the legend of Route 29 became my reality.